We had a very exciting day of tennis. Extremely exciting day. Great Federer was out in fairly good form, and I certainly want to focus my discussion today on the Federer match. We have to break that down. We have to distill what it means. It was a strong match. It was a straight set win. Federer joins his comrade in arms, Alexander Zverev, in coming through so far in straight sets. Karen Khachanov will be facing Nadal tomorrow, also came through in straight sets. Hello, how are you doing? Did you see the Federer match? I also want to talk about the Nadal match. The Nadal match was something to behold, to be sure. Nadal, I think, really looks strongest of all of the big three members. Of course, Murray was sent packing across the Atlantic. Well, I'm glad you saw the whole Federer match, Patrick. I thought his outfit looked a lot better, and I think his tennis looked somewhat better. I want to break that match down. What did you think, Patrick? Let me know. I want to go into that. Right now, we have a couple of matches pending. We've got Djokovic, who seems to be doing a bang-up job on the American Tennis Sangren, has taken the first set and brought Tennis Sangren to the Olive Garden for a breadstick. They're moving on to the second set. Meanwhile, Kei Nishikori is up a set against Monfils. No surprises with Cilic, seems to be plowing through Hurkacz. So we'll come back to those. But the first match I wanted to talk about, and this will be the nugget for the day. I want to discuss this nugget in connection with Nadal. Yeah, I thought he played well, Patrick. I agree with you. I thought it was a good, solid job. There were some really good points about that match. As I'm thinking about it, maybe it would be a good idea to discuss the Federer match first, and then we'll talk about Nadal. And we can come back to Federer. Federer looked good today, folks. It was a strong showing in the second round, without question. And I thought Federer, based on the numbers to some degree, but also just based on my empirical evidence of watching him, I think he did a better job in this match than he did against Nishioka. Now, with Nishioka, he was strong in the first two sets, to be sure, but kind of tapered off a bit at the end and sort of crumbled. He did escape the match. But as I said a couple of nights ago, against an opponent of a higher caliber, say a Nick Kyrgios, when he's firing on all cylinders, and I want to talk a little about Nick Kyrgios today, or say a Juan Martín del Potro. Well, he won't have to deal with that here, but certainly a Djokovic could be a person. The hyena, excuse me. Djokovic is not a person. He's a hyena. Djokovic could be the hellacious hyena that presses Federer on that score, on that front, in terms of Federer's ability to follow through on his propositions and put a period at the end of his matches. The final score in Federer versus Paire was 7-5, 6-4, 6-4. The great Federer is marching through this tournament in straight sets so far. He's never struck out. He's always been in the first week. I think the last time he was ousted in the first week of the U.S. Open was in 2000. It's been almost 20 years. So he's a mainstay in this first week. He has not won the tournament in a long time. It's been 10 years, which is another reason why it's hard to say, that the safe money is on Federer here. But let's talk about this match. We have more evidence of the great Federer in action in the 2018 U.S. Open. On the positive side, one thing has to be mentioned about Federer's play today, and it's that he had a very solid breakpoint conversion rate. And that's important. He was 5 out of 9 or 56% in the aggregate on breakpoint conversion. Bravo, Roger. That's what you need to bring. He's won matches on a lot less, and he struggles with his conversion rate, but he delivered. In the first set, he was 100% on his breakpoint conversion rate. And in the third set, he was 2 out of 3 or 67%. They're very solid numbers, and they suggest that Federer may just be able this year to deliver some of that clutch tennis. He also saved a few breakpoints. Federer was masterful at the net today, folks. I'm going through the positive points about this match first. He was masterful from the net. 77% of the points at the net won, 27 out of 35. Bravo again. Excellent. Compare that to someone like Nick Kyrgios over in his match today against Paire Hubert. Hope you like that French accent. He looked very good today, of course, but what I was going to say about Kyrgios is Kyrgios was not approaching. This was an all-court match. Now, Benoit, and I'm going to call him Benoit, I think we are in a very strange time in the history of tennis and really in the history of the world when a professional tennis player actually intentionally mispronounces his own name. If the people that are talking to me in terms of the viewers are right, and I think some of them are, they sound smart. They say his name's pronounced Benoit, but Benoit himself doesn't say that on the ATP site. So he's either trying to mislead us or he wants to maybe go with an easier pronunciation that everybody can understand. Well, I don't think Benoit is very hard either. So I don't want to go on and on about the pronunciation, but Caroline Wozniacki is another person who just doesn't bother to correct it. She kind of propagates this mistaken pronunciation of her name. It's not pronounced Wozniacki, folks. It's Wojnajska. Caroline Wojnajska. That's it. Out of the horse's mouth. But this was an all-court match between Federer and Paire. They're both really interesting players. They are entertaining players. The bearded Frenchman, Benoit, I think he's ended up smashing at least one racket today. I know, LSB, but go check the ATP site. That's my point. My point is that he's actually not saying his name correctly. If what you're telling me is true, he's not pronouncing it correctly because he's not saying Benoit. But Benoit spent some time at the net as well. He's an all-court player. These two are very capable at exploiting the entire tennis court in ways that a lot of players on the tour are not. I like Benoit Paire, even though he smashes his rackets and even though he brings that long, sweltering beard. Gosh, why would you want to wear a beard like that in this weather? But there were some problems, too, with Federer's play. I mean, one way to look at this is that Paire sort of lost this match because there were a lot of errors from Paire. He actually exceeded the number of unforced errors that Federer committed, but Federer had a problem there. I want to come back to that. There were well, we can talk about it. There were definitely too many unforced errors on the part of Federer. 39, which is worse than in the match with Nishioka. He had 32 unforced errors against Nishioka. Of course, the more relevant figure is the ratio to winners, to unforced errors, or at least that's one way to kind of put a nuance that in that. And on the first set, he had 13 winners to 14 unforced errors. In the second set, 8 winners to 12 unforced errors. In the third set, 6 winners to 13 unforced errors. Well, the unforced errors were exceeding the winners, to be sure. Paire did create a few break points, and he was able to convert in both the first and the third set. He had a break point in the second set as well, but he couldn't convert. There was an exchange of breaks in both the first and third sets. But Federer did demonstrate an ability that I've associated with Nadal and Djokovic to come back and break back. So that was a very positive sign from Federer. He was playing some clutch tennis today, folks, which was really good. Benoit, on the other hand, was actually serving a lot faster than Federer in the ad court, or somewhat faster. It's interesting. Paire brings a pretty impressive serve, but he did have some emotional problems today. He's just uneven in that regard. Federer stayed fairly balanced, which was good. He had no reason to be worried. He didn't worry. He did what he needed to do. It was a bit of an ugly match, but he did pull the rabbit out of the hat in the end and has the win. One of the keys to this match, and one of the keys for every match, and Federer didn't quite perform up to snuff in this regard, is that Federer should be winning around 80% or more when serving at 15-30. Win 80% of the points when serving at 15-30. Well, he only did that here in the first set. Paire was applying some pressure, but on the whole, I think Paire led up. The heat got to him. It was hard. It was a very hot day, and I want to apologize to you guys. I think I stated last night in the live stream that we're going to get some relief today, and that's what my app was saying, but that's not how it turned out. The relief is coming tomorrow, I believe, although I kind of want to put a reservation around that as well, because you never know what can happen with Mother Nature. But listen, folks, in general with Federer, it was a fine match. It was another very trying day with respect to the heat. The players were under a lot of pressure in that particular respect. And Federer pushed through. And in contrast to Nishioka, I think, he ended the match with his head held high. He ended the match on a strong point. He played a really good, a really solid third set. He did surrender a break of serve, but he did what he had to do. Breaks of serve are not a big deal. That's what Nadal believes, and that's what Djokovic believes. They don't freak out when they get broken. Pospisil, of course, broke the great Nadal last night. We know what Nadal does in response. Happens pretty much every time. We'll talk about Nadal, but the nugget with respect to Federer is this. He needs to minimize the unforced errors. He needs to get into the moment a little more. He needs to dictate play a little more accurately, but mainly with respect to the evidence that this match sort of provides as to Federer's form on the eve of a match against the towering Australian Nick Kyrgios, who we'll talk about in a second. It demonstrated that he can bring us some clutch tennis. It demonstrated that he can convert. He can create break points against a very solid server. Of course, we knew he could do this, but it's just a matter of whether he's sort of finding his form here at this particular tournament. We know he's been fickle in a way, or uneven, unpredictable. So we're looking for evidence as followers of the great Federer. We want him to play great. So I think today demonstrated, and this is the nugget for tonight's live stream, it demonstrated that Federer will be bringing clutch tennis to the U.S. Open this year. And I'm glad he will be bringing some clutch tennis, because he may just have to against Nick Kyrgios in the third round. Well, Kyrgios came through Paire, who was a very impressive player with a fantastic serve, a multi-time Grand Slam doubles winner, a serve and volleyer, Herbert is, to some degree. He can do that. He can do that quite well. I like Herbert. And the Frenchman took the first set from the mighty Kyrgios, and the second set was tight, pushed to the breaker, and Kyrgios was able to slip out of that breaker and take the second set. Well, that changed the momentum of the match. Kyrgios came on strong, and by the last set, when Kyrgios took the Frenchman to the bagel shop, Kyrgios, it was essentially a slaughter fest. And that had to do with the heat to some degree, too. Well, in the head-to-head between Federer and Kyrgios, it's 2-1. Federer leads. If you add in the Laver Cup, it's even better. But they've had some very close matches. And Kyrgios showed, and there were some events in this Kyrgios match, by the way. You guys have probably heard some of this gossip with respect to Kyrgios. The umpire came down and started giving him a pep talk. Basically, Kyrgios got into one of his little funks, got into one of his little bratty moods. He was kind of losing the match, and he got bratty. And what he started to do is what he kind of always does. He kind of starts to hit more casually and actually pulls off some amazing stuff. Right? Looking like he's in a sort of exhibition match, he pulls off some truly amazing stuff, but then he also has a lot of unforced errors. But Kyrgios did execute one part of this. I don't know if it was a strategy, but it's something he did. Obviously, his emotions were getting the better of him, but it was also a strategy because it's hard for an opponent to deal with, and that was rushing through the points on serve. He was just serving one after the other, after the other, after the other. A couple double faults in there. It was like a double fault and, just moving. And the umpire came down and said, "You're going too fast. The ball people can't get back into their places, buddy." Hello, Yalia. Nice to see you. Let's take a comment about Federer. Crevisan says, honestly, Fed looks average, a bit sluggish. I guess it's the tired legs. Has not been playing the best attacking tennis he can play. I just don't see him having the edge to beat Novak or Kyrgios at this point. Well, that's a kind of grim view of it. Listen, the matches between Kyrgios and Federer have been tight. Djokovic, let's see, looking fairly strong. They're on serve in the second set, but Djokovic took Tennis Sangren to the Olive Garden in the first set. Whether it's the kind of play, talking about Federer here, whether it's the kind of play that can get the hyena worried, get the hyena tripping over himself, essentially, the elastic hyena. Well, that's a question. That is a question. But I can say this. It's part of the nugget, which is he's improving. I think he improved tonight generally. That conversion rate, folks, was very impressive on the part of Federer and above average for him. Now, we could go through the details on all of those break points and how he was able to convert some of them, no doubt, with Paire errors, and Paire was making more than a few errors, more than Federer, and Federer committed an enormous amount of unforced errors in this match. Now, unforced errors, it's only one metric. It's only one metric. And again, the winner to unforced errors ratio is a good one to look at to get a better sense of what the unforced errors mean. Because sometimes you get a lot of unforced errors from a player, but they play devastating matches, tons of winners. It's just attacking tennis. Unforced errors kind of come in under an attacking approach. You got to be willing to take risks. Sometimes the risks will materialize against you, some unforced errors in there, but it's one metric. He was doing what he needed to do. You look at the face of it, and he was retaliating. Okay. When he was broken, he was retaliating. And if he can get into that kind of, if he can get comfortable with that kind of approach and not sort of freak out when he gets broken, and I don't think he does. This is not to say that he does. He comes down. But listen, if you're going to put Federer next to Nadal and do a comparison, Nadal, I think, is a little less worried after he's broken than Federer is. You know, neither of them are terribly worried. They're two of the all-time greatest tennis players, and they've done this many times before. But Federer is a little more worried than Nadal. But with a performance like today, he can gain some confidence. So he can drop a serve, but he can come back like a killer cat and take the break back. Well, that's what he did in large part today, and that is a very, very good sign. Meanwhile, for those of you who think that Federer might not be able to get over the Kyrgios hurdle, Kyrgios has some cracks in the edifice as well. Kyrgios has problems. Kyrgios can't really get into Federer's serve. The problem is that Federer can have difficulty getting into Kyrgios' serve, and it's pretty much impossible to get into Kyrgios' serve sometimes. But Kyrgios is looking a little unpredictable in this tournament, to be honest. Look at the face of it. Kyrgios is dropping sets. Federer is coming through in straights. That suggests something. Last time they played, it was in Stuttgart. Kyrgios took the first set in a tiebreaker. Federer came roaring back to take the second set 6-2, and then took the final set in a tiebreaker. It was a close match again. They play close matches, and the conventional wisdom is that we are going to get some tiebreakers tomorrow. So that will probably happen. Continue discussing or having a discussion on Federer, and I can come into this, but I did want to talk about Nadal for a moment. The Nadal-Pospisil match. Pospisil is a young Canadian, very strong server, and had some flashes of brilliance last night in the match against Nadal. But I tell you that Nadal is looking so fit, so ready and committed to this tournament, so consistent. Federer committed 39 unforced errors in his match today. You want to know how many Nadal had? 16. Alexander Zverev, who's coming through this tournament in straights, had even less than that, I think, in his match today. Nadal looked so strong. The first serve was just devastating from Nadal last night. 73% of his first landing in, 84% win percentage on his first. Wow. Fantastic. Fairly good on the second as well. He was 14 out of 17 at the net. Impressive. Not coming to the net as much as, say, a Federer or even a Paire, but very effective at the net. He was dominating Pospisil, but the young Canadian did go up a break in the second set, and it looked like the match could maybe turn around. Maybe it could get interesting. I moved a little closer to the edge of my seat, but not that close, because we all know what Nadal does. He doesn't mind getting broken. It's not a big deal. Well, he does mind it. It upsets the bull a little bit. And he counterattacks. He retaliates, and it works virtually every time, at least with a player of the caliber of a Pospisil, who is a good player, don't get me wrong, but not a world-class player. Well, as it happened, it was a lot of Pospisil errors that produced the break back partially for Nadal in the second set. But then Nadal breaks again. He took the set, and it was a very smooth ride. Pospisil essentially collapsed in this match. The poor Canadian, he'll go back home and have to rethink his approach in matches against players as lethal as Nadal, as ruthlessly consistent as Nadal. But you know what I was thinking? We've called Nadal a bull. The way he returns serve, however, isn't quite reminiscent of a bull. He's so quick. He's nervous. There's so much nervous energy in a way. And I had to sort of conclude that it was a little cat-like. The way he returns serve specifically, it's a little cat-like. So here we are at a point where Federer and Nadal kind of come together in the twilight zone. Fedal. Maybe they're more similar than we think. There are some spheres in which they are very similar, and they win in much the same way. Nadal is a point constructor. He constructs points. He constructs them a little differently than Federer, but he constructs points. He's not a pusher generally. He can adopt that approach in particular contexts. He's not above pushing for the sake of pushing. That's the best way to win the match. Djokovic, as we've said, made that conclusion in Cincinnati, apparently. Not to take any credit away from him, because, of course, he had another gear that Federer didn't require that he kick into. But back to Nadal. He was averaging over 70 miles per hour on his second serve return opportunities. Devastating, at least in the second and third sets. He didn't do that in the first set. And he was over 60 miles per hour on his return in response to the first. Just devastating stuff. He was dictating play, these accelerating ground strokes coming off of Nadal's forehand are just too much for the young Canadian to handle, to weather. The sweltering heat just melting the players away, but Nadal perseveres. Again, such a small amount of unforced errors. There was a moment for Pospisil, but he just couldn't persevere. There was a second where he made some mind-blowingly good shots, and he can play at the net too, mind you. Pospisil's got talent. He does. He's got real talent. But he couldn't endure. He couldn't push through. He couldn't maintain the level because, in essence, at the end of the day, Rafa wouldn't let him. He said, "No, sir. No, sir, my boy. We won't be having any of that tonight." So Rafa did a pretty good interview at the end of the night. Nothing particularly insightful that he said, but it was good to hear him. He's going on to face Karen Khachanov. Now, some of you have been following Khachanov. Some of you have some views on him. He is a very impressive player, a very large player. He's 6'6". Of course, Rafa knows how to deal with the giants. The giants are no big thing for Nadal, are they? Khachanov has 2 titles under his belt at Marseille and Chengda, both 250 level tournaments, but impressive nevertheless. He's come through in straight sets. He beat Ramos Vinolas, who is a pretty tricky customer, to be honest, particularly on the red dirt. But here, the courts are playing like the dirt. So what's the difference? Khachanov also came through Sonigo. There have been no tiebreakers in either of Khachanov's matches. Well, The head-to-head between Nadal and Khachanov is 4-0. It doesn't look good for Khachanov, really. He's never taken a set from Rafa. He's played 2 tie breaks or brought Rafa to 2 tie breaks. They did do one best-of-5 set at Wimbledon in 2017 in the 3rd round, which was the round before Nadal's match against Gilles Muller, in which he was ousted at a fairly early point, thereby continuing his slump. They did meet at the Rogers Cup just a couple of weeks ago in the semifinal, and it's telling that Khachanov was even in the semifinal. So that's of a 1,000-level tournament, Masters tournament. So that's positive news for Khachanov. I think Khachanov didn't have a great result, as I recall, in Winston-Salem, but he rested up and he seems to be solid at the U.S. Open. Folks, it could be an interesting match. It will be a taller task for Nadal than yesterday's opponent. And so there'll be another test. But at this point, Nadal is looking solid, folks. He's looking, I wouldn't call him a shoe-in, but it's looking like a very smooth ride into this, say, quarterfinal anyway, semifinal. Smooth as a baby's bottom. Team, you might argue that team renders it a little rougher than a baby's bottom. Or possibly Anderson in the quarterfinal. We'll have to see. He won't have to deal with Sock in the round of 16. Again, it's going to be either Basilashvili or Pella. So the trip into the quarterfinals is smooth as a baby's bottom. Team might rough up that baby's bottom just a little bit, or potentially Anderson, but I don't think they're going to have any insurmountable answers for Nadal, so to speak. And then it will be into the semifinal for Rafa, where he'll probably be facing probably Delpo, possibly Wawrinka, possibly Raonic. We'll just have to see. We have the Raonic versus Wawrinka match coming up tomorrow. All of those matches are going to be fantastic. And let me say that this tournament is becoming more, I can just feel it. It's becoming more exciting by the minute, almost by the hour, with each passing match. With each passing match, it's becoming historic. It's becoming absolutely historic. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other matches. I'll take some questions first. Thoughts on Cilic's match tonight? Well, regrettably, I'm not watching it, but 2 trips to the bagel shop. Good God. Well, as I understand it, this was a qualifier. I don't know a lot about this individual that he played, but this seems to be pretty smooth as a big bottom for Cilic, too. Now, Cilic will be going on to face Goffin. We can look at some of Cilic's numbers if you guys are interested in that. But listen, he is a U.S. Open champion, and he is one person who could lift this trophy this year. It could happen. He's looking strong, but again, I'm not entirely convinced that this was the stiffest of competition for him tonight. He'll go on to face David Goffin. Goffin looked solid. Divine David, as LSB likes to say. Divine David looked solid today, notwithstanding the fact that Robin Haase was able to snatch the second set in a tiebreak. Start a discussion on Goffin. He's one of my favorite players with a 2-hander anyway. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do in this tournament. Cilic is a big obstacle for him, and that is going to be a fantastic match. I'm sorry. We don't know that's going to happen yet. Let me back up. It's my predicted match, but Goffin still has to face Struff. Cilic is going to face de Minaur. And de Minaur looks to be just cleaning up in this tournament. Tiafoe did take a set off de Minaur, but there was another bagel in that. De Minaur looks very solid in this tournament. Not a very big guy, young, an Australian. Had a couple of good results this year. We'll have to look at him. Again, that will be Cilic's competition in the third round. We've got the Nishikori match as well that's happening right now. Djokovic is happening. He looks to have this match against Tennys Sandgren under control. Absolutely. I watched a bit of the women's match last night. Let me dial up the numbers of it. Because I want to talk specifically about this. Let's see. This is from yesterday. Let's see. Men's singles. I want women's singles. Excuse me. So Muguruza against Muchova. This was a fantastic second round match, and it ended with a big upset. Muchova, who's very athletic and was playing brilliantly out there, came through. The former Grand Slam champion. I think she's won Wimbledon. Again, I'm not as conversant with the women, but I believe it's been Wimbledon a couple of times, maybe. Muguruza. Number of people were picking her as the favorite for the French. She didn't do well in the French this year, but she's a great player. She's a beautiful woman, Muguruza. Beautiful. A Spaniard. But she is the stiffest tennis player I've seen in my life, literally. I mean, one of the stiffest tennis players I've ever seen in my life. She's very big. She gets the job done sometimes, but she couldn't do it against Muchova because Muchova was just so much more athletic, elastic, retrieving shots she had no business retrieving, but most of all, turning out some very impressive accelerating ground strokes and just dictating play. I mean, she reminded me of, to be honest, a great men's player. I mean, she was that good. She's pretty much a no-name. They were talking after the match that, and based on this the third round run, she'll be making at least a couple $100,000, which is money that she's never known anything like that kind of money. She was fantastic, folks, and Muguruza was stiff as a board. Stiff as a board. Stiff as a 2x4. Well, 2x4s are good for building houses, but they don't win tennis matches. She's also a hollering. She's a hollering 2x4. Maybe we could build a haunted house with her. A house that howls because she was grunting to a very significant degree, whereas Muchova was a fairly quiet worker. So I was happy with that match, notwithstanding the fact that Muguruza, she does have a beautiful service motion. Gorgeous. Love the way she serves. But once she gets into rallies, it is pretty obviously kind of stiff. She makes her shots. She goes for the right shot. She has a good intuition. But in terms of just kind of feel on the court, she is not a pretty player, and she's stiff as a board. She's a howling 2x4, and we should build a haunted house with her, but it's not a good way to win tennis matches. Well, I'll take it easy on Muguruza. She seems like a sweet woman, but even the announcers were talking about how stiff she was. And that's part of the reason why, again, Mukova, so much more athletic, moving around the court so much more fluently. And so she really deserved that. It was touching at the end of that because that was a big, big upset for Mukova. That was the match of her life. Muguruza not happy at the handshake. Totally unhappy, not really even willing to look at the opponent that just outdid her. The no-name that just outdid her. Well, best wishes to Muguruza. I hope she limbers up. I think it's possible. I do think it's possible. But let's talk a little bit about Alexander Zverev because he's one that's coming through in straight sets, posting tremendous numbers and percentages. He's one that is coming through this draw mysteriously, covertly even. Not a lot of light getting shed, pointed at Zverev in a way. He's going to have to deal with Kohlschreiber in the next round. Totally doable, not an insurmountable obstacle for the blitzkrieg. No, sir. But based on the way I just described him, he's kind of covertly coming in. Maybe Zverev should be the snake, the German snake, snaking through this tournament. Well, let's see if he snakes his way right up to the round of 16 to meet, say, Nishikori or possibly the little engine that could, Diego Schwartzman, who's playing quite well at this tournament. I saw a funny picture on Twitter. Maybe you saw it. Schwartzman was sitting in one exercise bike. It was a picture from behind. Isner was sitting in one exercise bike, and right next to him on another exercise bike, they must have been warming up, was Diego Schwartzman. And you can imagine how funny that picture looked. But Zverev, again, then he can get through Nishikori, Schwartzman, that's doable. However, then in the quarterfinals, the snake might have to deal with the likes of Marin Cilic before getting on to the semifinals. So things get more difficult for him. And then, if he were to get into the semifinals, who would be waiting on the other side of the court for the rising German star, Alexander Zverev, who's like a snake in the grass in this tournament? It could be Djokovic. Well, that will be a fantastic match, but it also could be Federer. It also could be Federer. I still have faith that there's a possibility for Federer. We'll have to see. My nugget on Federer, for those of you just joining, is that he demonstrated today that he can play some clutch tennis, folks. His conversion rate was redoubtable. He was prowling on the court fairly well. He was moving well. He's probably a little cooler in that white shirt. I don't know why he would have worn. Of course, that was a night match. He came out in the maroon, or some people are calling it crimson. I'm calling it maroon because we have the band Maroon 5, so I'm calling him Maroon Fed. But he wasn't quite maroon fed. I guess his shorts were maroon today. I don't know why you'd wear dark colors like that when it's so hot, but today it was a little better with the white. I'm glad he mixed that up a little bit, but he played some clutch tennis. His conversion rate was very good. There were a few forehands that were just out of this world, masterful. There was a lot of forward momentum in many of the points. There were too many unforced errors. That's the nugget on Federer. He's not quite in the zone yet, but he doesn't quite need to be yet, or he didn't need to be today. Paire was off his game, to be honest. The bearded racket smasher will go home, having lost to the great Roger Federer for the 7th time. And this one was not very competitive. Remember it, Halle, or was it Stuttgart? I'm sorry. Whenever Paire had a match point. So that was a competitive match that went to a third set, and that was a tiebreaker in the last set. Paire can get up in Federer's serve when he wants to, or when he feels like he can, when the time is right, when the opportunities present themselves. I guess one question is, does Roger present those opportunities? But he played some clutch tennis, and I was happy. I was happy with what I saw. It wasn't perfect. The unforced errors are too plentiful, folks. Too plentiful. That won't stand up against Nadal, and that will not stand up against Djokovic. Their games are predicated on very low unforced errors. It's true. Now, Federer has a little more latitude in that regard, a little more room to move with the unforced errors because of his serve and because of the way his game is structured. It's different from Nadal's, and he shouldn't. I was saying before, there are some similarities in that twilight zone we call Fedal. There are some similarities. Both are cat-like on the return, but Nadal is he's almost fidgety. It's amazing. I love the way he returns. I don't like the way all the players return. Tsitsipas is one of these guys. I really don't like his. I mean, people talk about service motions, but there's also kind of the return motion. And Tsitsipas's return motion, his return movement is odd. And it reminds me of a puppy dog. He's just a little too he's a little too earnest about it or something. I'm not sure. He just seems a little uneasy. Nadal it's total focus. There is nervous energy with Nadal, but it's not like a puppy dog. He's a killer. Nadal is a killer. And perhaps when he's doing his return, he's thinking kill, kill, kill. I don't know what Tsitsipas is thinking. Tsitsipas may not be thinking about too much. He demonstrated in his last match that he's a little bit absent-minded. And if you're watching, Stefanos, no hard feelings, my friend. It was a little absent-minded. I understand. It was a hot day. You didn't understand necessarily how the rules were supposed to be applied. And of course, your buddy Medvedev was not apprising you of anything. And basically, I understand. You might have kind of been just kept in the dark in that respect. You just didn't know about the break or whatever. But you've had better days. You've had better days. And with respect to your service returns, do whatever you have to do, my friend. Do whatever you have to do. But I like Nadal on his return motion. I like Federer on his return motion. I like Busta on his return motion because he puts the left hand right on his knee, just like a baseball umpire. Let's take some questions or see what we've got going here. Monfils, yes, he seems to be strong. Or we've got Nishikori versus Monfils. Well, Nishikori has taken the first set and is now serving for the second set. Djokovic is now up 2-0 against Sandgren. He's going to make pretty short shrift, of this match. Djokovic looking strong, not appearing to be a match in which the Djokovician paradox rears its head. The Djokovician paradox is sometimes he must lose, he must taste loss. His opponent has to take him to the edge of the cliff and look down and see loss. And then, and only then, Djokovic can kick himself into high gear. He goes into God mode. But he needs the loss. He needs to taste the loss. Well, he doesn't appear to be needing that kind of stimulus in this match. In some matches, it's just a straight-ahead affair. Tennis Sandgren does not look to be putting up much of a challenge, to be honest. I'll have more to say about the Djokovic match tomorrow, to be sure. But the outcome of the Monfils-Nishikori will be interesting as well. Again, it will probably be in the round of 16, Alexander Zverev versus Nishikori as it's working out, unless Monfils can turn this around. Well, Monfils is capable of turning matches around. He's a comeback kid. He's another one with a lot of style. I like Monfils. I like Paire. I like Federer. I even like Kyrgios. They kind of have personalities and style. Kyrgios, well, jury's still out on Kyrgios. I liked what he did today. He was rushing through the points, and the umpire, it was a little bit bizarre. The umpire came down and started giving Kyrgios a pep talk. Something to the, obviously telling him that he's going too fast, but also kind of giving him a pep talk in a way. And I can imagine that Herbert's coaches would have been a little on edge about this. What's the umpire doing, like having this coaching session with Nick Kyrgios? It didn't look right. But I'm not sure he was doing so much coaching. I mean, one of the main points is you're going too fast. Isn't that interesting? The first year we have a shot clock, and Nick Kyrgios is all the way over at the other end of the extreme, right? Just going so fast. I mean, a couple of seconds in between serves, the ball people couldn't get back into position. He was going too fast. He was just coming down the tracks too fast. And this was actually at a point in the match when he was losing, kind of suffering. Again, he lost the first set. They went to the breaker in the second set. And that was when it was happening. Well, he was just rolling through these points. And I thought it was kind of effective. I liked that. I like when Federer does that as well. A lot of these players, that's part of the time manipulation. There's time manipulation that occurs within points. I was talking about it yesterday as a fundamental element of Federer's game, which is taking the ball early, taking time away from his opponent. But there's also a temporal dimension to serving and the time taken in between serving and the rhythm to that. Of course, Rafa Nadal has this extended ritual that he performs, farts out of his butt, and doing all the things he does, which sometimes will accumulate into a time violation that hardly ever gets called. But Federer likes to play with his opponent in terms of the time, particularly on serve. So Nick was doing this at a breakneck pace. I mean, really, he was serving faster than I've ever seen anybody serve in a tennis match. He gets into that casual mode. It's a little bit off-putting because it seems like he doesn't care. And that's not a good thing to see on a tennis court. It's kind of demoralizing for the opponent, but he seems like he just doesn't care. And when he doesn't care, then he starts playing in this kind of relaxed exhibition mode. And this was the context in which he began to serve very, very quickly in terms of like serving, doing a first serve, then going right to the ad court and back and forth and back and forth. And there'd be double faults mixed in. And Herbert was just dazed and confused. But he was dealing with it. He was rolling with the punches, Herbert. Again, I like Herbert. A multiple Grand Slam winner in doubles, great server, and an all-court player. He can serve and volley very well, unlike Nick Kyrgios. Very much unlike Nick Kyrgios. Well, I suppose Tsitsipas's loss did vindicate Nick Kyrgios to some degree. Remember, Nick Kyrgios said that Tsitsipas is not a very good player. But I don't want to give Kyrgios that much credit, to be honest. He wasn't right. Tsitsipas is a great player. But what I did note the other night about Tsitsipas, folks, is that he still doesn't have any titles. You know, he's got nothing to show for all he's done. He's had some deep runs. He's been, you know, he's gotten himself into some finals that many people who have won, you know, multiple titles at the 250 level have not been able to get into the finals that Tsitsipas has been able to get into, you know. So in a way, he's kind of leapfrogging. And I think that's probably what's creating the bit of tension that exists between, on the one hand, folks like Alexander Zverev and Nick Kyrgios, and on the other hand, Tsitsipas himself and his supporters. Because the Zverev Kyrgios perspective is that, you know, it's a process. It's a bumpy ride. You got to fight in the streets for a while. You got to be scrappy and play the lower level tournaments, win a few of those titles, and just go gradually up. Climb the stairs, as it were, gradually. But they don't like Tsitsipas necessarily because maybe they think he's just kind of leapfrogging. Like, what's he doing? He hasn't even won a title. That's what Kyrgios is thinking. And if you kind of start riffing on this mode of thinking about Tsitsipas, you know, you can kind of convince yourself that, you know what? Again, he doesn't have any trophies at the end of the day to in his cabinet. You know, there's nothing there. So he's got a lot of talent. I stick to my proposition. He's going to be a number one player one day, but he's young. Time is on his side, just as Federer was saying about Zverev. Federer made a comment about the Zverev-Lendl partnership and really didn't say much of anything at all. I think the Express tried to make it, as always, the Express tried to make it into a story, and it wasn't a story. But I think Federer just said, yeah, Zverev knows what he's doing. He knows how to beat the top players. And I think he thought the Lendl coaching situation could be a positive adjustment to Federer's team. Excuse me, Zverev's team. Yeah. So in any case, that might come around to bite him because you never know. This thing could shake out and we could see Alexander Zverev versus Roger Federer in the semifinal. It could happen. It's not what I'm predicting. As I look at this bottom half of the draw and as I observe the tournament, it strikes me that we're probably looking at a Djokovic-Cilic in the semifinal, but it very well could be a Zverev versus Djokovic. We'll just have to see. The other news from today that affects Federer's draw is that Fognini lost. Chung also lost. These things mean that Federer's round of 16 match will be against either John Millman or Mikhail Kukushkin. So those are people that I don't consider as formidable of a threat, really, in terms of the history and the precedent as Chung and Fognini. So I think Roger's draw just got the pressure lifted just a little bit. He might have a little relief there in the round of 16. Well, if Djokovic continues, the relief will only be the one we've been talking about between Federer and Djokovic. Folks, it looks like it's going to happen. It's a best of 5. It could be an epic match. That's the one I truly am looking forward to. I want them to face off again. Federer wants a piece of the hyena, folks. He wants the Serbinator. It's true. He's not scared of Djokovic. Some people like to come on and say, oh, Federer's scared. He tries to avoid Djokovic. No, he wants Djokovic. He wants a piece of Djokovic. And he wants a piece of Djokovic at the 2018 U.S. Open. And I think he can get a piece of the hyena. I think he can. I think he's demonstrated some clutch tennis. That's my nugget for the day. Federer in clutch mode. His conversion rate today was impressive. There's no getting around that. The unforced errors were disappointing, but they can be improved. And he was hitting a lot of very nice winners as well. Again, Federer's game doesn't rest on an extremely low number of unforced errors in the same way as Nadal and Djokovic's game does. Or do. But I think he's capable. I think the killer cat can slay the hyena, folks. It's possible. I've predicted, based on the hard math, the scientific approach, that Djokovic will push through the great Federer and prevent Federer from lifting his record 21st trophy. It seems too far-fetched to me, in a way, to believe that Roger can win this tournament. I guess I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but when you think about it, think about the history. He hasn't won this thing since 2008. He's been consistent. He gets through the first week, as I said before. But the caveat is that if he can get through Djokovic, if he can push through Kyrgios. Now, Kyrgios is his first problem. And Kyrgios could be a big problem. It's interesting with these players. I mean, Kyrgios is, for some players on the circuit, Kyrgios is not a very intimidating player, or is not as intimidating as theoretically he should be for Roger Federer. And this happens a lot. We had the Medvedev-Tsitsipas match the other day. Medvedev was able to prevail over Tsitsipas. Medvedev knows how to play Tsitsipas in a way that Djokovic doesn't, in a way that Zverev doesn't. So there are interesting combinations with these players. Some players kind of figure certain other players out, but it's not necessarily reflected in their rankings because they haven't figured out a number of other players, or maybe even the vast majority of players. But Kyrgios has figured something out about Federer. I mean, one obvious key for Kyrgios is just protecting his serve and getting into the breakers with Federer. And Federer, I believe, is the master of the breaker, one of the masters of the breaker. But Kyrgios, that's a strategy for winning a match, because it's not guaranteed that Federer will win the breaker once you're into it, particularly not with a server like Kyrgios. And Kyrgios, to be quite honest, today demonstrated some clutch tennis as well. Probably not quite as much as Federer. I think that this match today with Federer, at the very least, marked an improvement. It was another sweltering day, excruciatingly hot. So that was a handicap. The relief is coming now. So that will help Federer. It will also help Kyrgios. It will also help Kyrgios. But listen, Federer has been able to push through the lanky Australian, the bratty Australian, on a number of different occasions. And I think that based on Federer's form, as evidenced in today's match, that he can edge Nick. It could be a tough match, but I think Federer is going to come out and strut some stuff on Saturday and show us an even higher level of play and demonstrate some improvement. Remember, for Fed fans, he's come through in straights, folks. He's come through in straights, and Paire is no slouch. Paire is actually a very fine tennis player. Excellent. Had a match point against Federer, remember, on the turf. But I do think Federer can push Kyrgios aside to get to the hyena. I think he can get to the hyena. Well, he'll have to push Kyrgios aside and then go into the fourth round. But the fourth round, as I was saying before, now you don't have Chung. You don't have Fognini. So the fourth round is going to look excellent. I want to take a Question, Inter and Terry, very intelligent viewer, knows tennis so. He's going to take me to task here. He says, Aaron, Paire was horrible. Please, my friend. 11 double faults. Yes, it was pretty ugly for Paire at many points during the match today. True enough. True enough. The double faults were a gift, to be sure. And some of the break point conversions were gifts. But generally, if you look at the numbers, it evidences a little more clutch tennis than we've been seeing from Federer. And in general, taking a nuanced view, I think it was a little better of a performance than the match against Nishioka, particularly because, not only because of the conversion rate, but because Federer finished fairly strong. He was decisive. He put a period on this proposition today, at least to a larger extent, in bolder print than he did against Nishioka. The Nishioka match, as I said, was looking like a run-on sentence the other night. It was pathetic. Pathetic maybe is a little too strong, but Federer tapered off. He tapered off, and the match could have gotten away from him. I've said it before. If a Alexander Zverev was on the other side of the court, if a Djokovic was on the other side of the court, and maybe even if a Nick Kyrgios was on the other side of the court, well, that match might have just gotten away from him, in fact. The same kind of dynamic with Kevin Anderson. He went up and then almost surrendered it all. Unfortunately for Federer, Nishioka is not the caliber of player that Kevin Anderson is. So that's, of course, how these draws are fixed. As we talked about last week, the first and second seeds get easy players in the first round. And the folks that are financially interested in this tournament want to see Roger Federer go as deep as possible because they make money on these matches with Federer. Listen, folks, this has been a fantastic live stream. I am going to have to close it out tonight. We have some fantastic matches coming tomorrow. A few examples. We'll have Thiem versus Fritz. We'll have Nadal versus Kachanov. We'll have Shapovalov versus Anderson. Fantastic. We'll have Isner versus Lajovic. Coric versus Medvedev. This thing is getting good, folks. I'm happy. Raonic versus Wawrinka. And finally, Del Potro versus Verdasco. It's going to be a fantastic day at the U.S. Open, and we're continuing this party. Tell your friends, subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, remember to hit the bell button so you'll get notifications of all future live streams. It'll be live and uncut. I've enjoyed your presence here. Thank you so much for your high tennis IQs. I love having you. And I will look very much forward to seeing you tomorrow. Even though I don't quite see you in terms of your face, I see your thoughts. Great to see you and have a wonderful evening. Best wishes. Bye.